want to welcome you to the show with Ministry with Coffee. And I'm so glad that you came on to speak to us today. Good
Hi,
morning.
thank you for having me. I'm honored to share what God's done in my life, in my marriage, and I just pray that it encourages someone listening to us today.
Oh, it will. So let's talk about, was there a time in your marriage that it was difficult and hard for you? And can you share that with the listeners today?
Oh, absolutely. I've walked through some dark, difficult seasons. One of the hardest was the crumbling of my marriage. It began during what I thought would be, the honeymoon phase, when we first got married. Um, and when I felt completely worn out emotionally, physically, spiritually. I was a new mom, just trying to hold everything together in a blended family. And inside, I was just breaking. My marriage felt distant. I was overwhelmed, disappointed. I just was thinking, like, how did we get here? How did I get here? This isn't what I wanted, with my life.
Can you tell me some of the things that you were kind of encountering? Was there like issues in the marriage, or were there problems that you saw? I mean, what kind of problems were that? Where is it just not getting along, or um,
Yeah.
communication?
Yes, all the above. There are a lot of obstacles in our marriage. We both came into it with wounds and baggage and broken expectations. My husband had three children from a previous marriage, and months after our wedding, I happily shared that I was pregnant. And shortly after, we got custody, and everything just seemed to shift at that point. There were behavioral issues, co-parenting conflicts, passive parenting with no discipline, and we didn't agree on that, and it felt like a nightmare instead of a honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
And I often felt like we were enemies rather than partners in this. We weren't
Mhm.
able to navigate that well, as a unit. And my husband was gone much of the time, during that time, including after our son was born. And so I was exhausted. I was living in survival mode. Um, Taking care of everything. I was up with our baby every night alone. There was a lot of anger.
Was he traveling with work or?
He was working, but he also was a football official. And that was something that his grandfather had done and his father had done. And it's something that he did with his father. It was more of like a hobby, but for him, he was very interested in it. And so a lot of nights, he was gone doing football games. And I guess we had different expectations of what that would look
Mhm.
like after our son was born. I felt like he would pull back a little bit and adjust because, of course, I had to make adjustments. Yeah,
Right.
that's what happens when you have a child. You bring a new life into this world. And those expectations for me were different than what they were for him.
Yeah.
And, there on top of that, there was anger, addiction, poor communication, disrespect, and just growing resentment. And I no longer respected my husband, at all. I mean, it began to show in how I spoke to him, usually with a condescending tone, because this kind of warped how I viewed him too, because I was thinking, he's not helping me, he's being selfish, like in my mind. And also, I wasn't really communicating very well what my expectations were, what my needs were. I was exhausted and frustrated, and I was not leaning on God during that time. And so, along with this anger, there was addiction, poor communication, the disrespect. As this resentment just grew and grew, it just got to a point where I was ready to leave. And, I even talked to a divorce attorney, and I just couldn't live like that anymore. And, there's this deep, just lack of connection between the two of us. I felt like we weren't even on the same team anymore. And when you're not united, it's easy for resentment to build, and it did.
Yeah. Well, how long did this go on, Mandy? I mean, was this just for like 6 months, or was it a year?
It went on, I would say, so our son, he is turning 7 this year. And so this was right when he was born. I found out I was pregnant with him about 3 or 4 months after our wedding. And shortly after I announced that I was pregnant, during my pregnancy was when all this went down, the custody battle and everything just, I mean, it just turned right upside down. And I mean, at that moment, I'm just thinking, wow, this is not what I thought marriage was going to be like. And this
Yeah.
wasn't like what I dreamed, right? Like, I was so excited to become a mom. And I was like, oh, our family is going to blend beautifully. Like, just naive, that life happens and things happen.
Hmm.
And boy, did it. And it was tough
Yeah, it's
for
hard
sure.
when you're blending a family because you've got three people, parents involved instead of just two. So
Hmm.
you're saying that you got custody over the three kids that he had with the previous.
Yes, so we got custody. The youngest wanted to stay with mom, and that was just a decision that my husband was. It was really difficult for him to make,
Right.
but it was something that he decided. Okay, I'm going to let him stay. Um, the other two came to live with us, and at first, that everyone was so excited, but
Yeah.
then the reality of blending everything, it just didn't work out. There were essentially co-parenting issues between the two of them. They weren't able to communicate with each other
Mhm.
well and work together. And there's kind of a lack of willingness to do so in some ways. And it was unfortunate because the kids were the ones that suffered for it. And so, with that, they eventually a lot of things ended up happening that led to them
Mhm.
essentially moving back like about a year or two later back with their mom.
Yeah.
Um, and that was just a dark, like it was so stressful on everyone involved. And everybody is on wonderful terms now.
That's
There's been
wonderful.
healing in this, but it was a long road to that for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, that's hard when you're getting married and you didn't realize that you would be, having a baby right away and then turn
Hmm.
around and raising two of the three kids for a short period of time, even a year and a half, it sounds like, or 2 years. Well, still,
Hmm.
it's hard to adjust when you're trying to adjust just being a mom yourself. So a new mom at
Yeah,
that too. So that's a lot. So that is a
absolutely,
lot. So it sounds like you had some challenges, just a few.
to say the least. Yeah,
So,
there are
so
definitely challenges.
Okay, so I know God showed up. So tell me a little bit about when did God show up, or when did you see God, and did you see God through all of this time that you were walking this journey? Because it's tough to see God when you're in the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, well, I will say, with all of this going on, I I was not blameless. Um, there was a lot going on in the house, but I was just avoiding it. I was tiptoeing around these hard conversations, trying to avoid, you know, escalations and defensiveness because that's what was happening whenever I brought things up. My husband had, he's very open about this. He has struggled with anger issues.
Right,
Um, and so I was just hoping somehow things will change on their own, which isn't going to happen. And I was numbing the pain every night. Eventually, long after I, stopped breastfeeding and all of that, eventually I started drinking wine every night. And
hmm,
it got to that point where it was almost like a routine, like brushing my teeth,
right,
just to just numb out. And I was just running on survival mode and barely keeping my head above water. And then eventually I hit a wall and I couldn't
right,
pretend that, everything was fine anymore. And I realized I couldn't change Josh. I couldn't change my husband. Uh, but I knew something had to change. So I focused on changing myself. And then as I began individual therapy and I realized how much resentment was just festering over all the years of just tolerating things that I wasn't okay with, and all the things that we couldn't resolve, all the issues that just
right.
got shoved under the rug. I decided to eliminate alcohol completely as I began healing, through
Good for
individual
you.
therapy. And the more I healed, the worse things got. And, change is scary. There were a lot of pushbacks. Like, he didn't like that. And it was kind of like worrisome. Um, you get used to how the two of you react. It's like this attachment kind of thing. And I was different. I was showing up differently. But after we had several failed marriage counseling sessions that went nowhere, I found myself in our dark closet one night. We had just had an intense conflict. I mean, it was ugly. And that was just the nail in the coffin for me. I remember just thinking, like, this is hopeless. Like,
Yeah.
this is hopeless and I can't fix this and I need help. It's over. And
Oh, you finally got to the end of yourself.
I got to the end of myself and I went into our dark walk. It was a little walk-in closet and literally hands out, crying, sobbing, tears going down my face. And I was like, Lord, I need you. And I can't stay in this marriage like this. I'm giving it to you. I don't know what to do anymore. Just tell me what to do and I will do it. And
Wow.
then I got up and I went to bed and I wasn't sure if he even heard me, uh, if he wanted to hear me. um, and I remember just thinking like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to bed and see what happens. But it was not just a prayer of surrender. Looking back, that was a prayer of hope because why would you even do it? You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But I love that you finally got to that place where you said, okay, God, he's yours. I'm yours. Do with me what you want to do with us, and
Hmm.
show me the way. So,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about how that looked after you finally surrendered. You went to bed, you woke up the next morning. I mean, how long did it take before you really believed that God made some changes in your marriage?
Well, it didn't take long. Um, it's actually kind of wild because, when I think about it, I get emotional because it's just so blatantly God. I mean, it couldn't be anything else.
Like,
About a week later, we ended up in Granbury. Um, my work, I had a little, I had something here for work in the Weatherford area. The trip seemed random, but looking back, obviously, I know it was divinely appointed. And while we were there, we were not in a good place at all. But we came together. We tried to have a good time with our son while we were here. And so, I mean, in the wildest series of events I can even tell you, we ended up looking around. We fell in love with Granbury. I already knew I had been there numerous times, with the women in my family and all the, just weekend trips and things like that. And we had been miserable where we were living for quite a while. We complained about it often. Um, but while we were here, we ended up looking around, looking at schools, and we actually found someone who ended up showing us a house, and we put up a for sale sign in our yard and moved about a month and a half later. And it was crazy because I remember my family and friends were very scared for me. They were like, what are you doing? This is illogical. Like you need to, and it's pretty bad. Like, when people who I've always been able to lean on, like they know how seriously I take marriage and my vows. And at that point, they really were like, you know, maybe there really is nothing left to fight for in this marriage, and um, that was sobering because I knew they were right. They were right at that point. Um, and I just remember thinking this doesn't make any sense. Like I need to cut my losses. Like this, yeah, leave the for sale sign up and let's go our separate ways. And I just remember praying about it and I just felt pulled to go, just absolutely pulled to go. And God just kept telling me, just go. And we did. And during that move, I was in front of our moving truck and we passed Stonewater. And I was like, oh, there's a church. And shortly after, it was 3 days later, we visited Stonewater and we knew like during that service, like we both looked at each other and cried and it just felt like home. And we kept going. We never went to another church and we ended up joining Reengage. And that was the beginning of a slow and steady transformation.
what is reengage?
Our marriage ministry at Stonewater.
That's wonderful.
Hmm.
So, okay, so you started reengage, and is that where you saw the God move in just a greater way in your marriage?
Oh, yes. Like that's to me, it was unbelievable. It wasn't just like the transformation of our marriage, but like in us individually. And God just began softening our hearts. We were given the tools that most of us, we don't we don't have, not everyone has perfect examples of every little thing. Like we're all humans.
Right.
But just healthy communication and resolving conflict and digging through all the junk and just getting it all out in the open and working through it and getting the tools to do all these things. Um, and so God began softening our hearts and
Mhm.
healing wounds and just rebuilding what had been broken, what we had broken. And it didn't happen overnight and it
No.
definitely was not linear, but it was progress. And for the first time, like we were actually working with God instead of just trying to fix things on our own, because we saw what happened when we did it on our own. It was a nightmare. And I think one of the biggest miracles wasn't just like that we actually stayed married. It's that we grew. And I was baptized there. Um, we found a community. The people in our groups, they become like our family, and I found peace
Right.
in knowing like I don't have to be perfect to be used by God. He was never asking me, to be flawless. He was just asking me to be faithful. And
Hmm.
if I had not done that, what where would we be now? And
Oh,
and and if
absolutely.
and so I just know like I want to follow him. And it's changed me. And so there's
It sounds like Reengage really kind of takes the biblical principles of marriage and it teaches you, I kind of like what you said. We don't really know how to do that. So let me ask you, by these tools that you guys have learned at Stonewater through Reengage, which is just incredible. I'm so glad that your church offers that for you because it's so important, for married couples, no matter what age, to be able to communicate and to build together and do it God's way. So let me ask you, what are you giving back now that you guys have found really the formula of making a marriage work by doing it just God's way? What are you giving back now?
oh wow, yeah. Well, I know, like for us, that we had tried everything. I had tried everything else aside from God. I had tried, performance, performing well, control, substances, people's approval, and
Right.
none of that satisfied what I needed. And when I finally came to Jesus in complete surrender, He gave me what I had been longing for all along, not just relief, but living water, like the word and his promises and redemption, purpose. And, he met me in my mess and saw me and he loved me and called me to more, called us there really, truly to re-engage. I feel like with everything that's happened, as soon as we finished and commenced re-engage, we already knew that we were going to keep going every Thursday. So they have an open group and you go and worship. And, you know, for us, we knew that if we stopped going on Thursdays, we had this dedicated time that's just about us and our marriage. And it felt sacred. And we were growing and we enjoyed the community. And we knew that if we did not go anymore and we stopped going, that we would just fill Thursday evenings with something else that really wasn't
Right.
as important. And so we just
Right.
kept going. And we are now, leaders. We are going through our third group. Um,
Wonderful.
and getting to help and serve the ministry that, helped us so much. And, today God just keeps giving me opportunities to share my story and to speak to other women, who may feel unseen or unworthy, or feel like, this is too far gone, or it's too late. Um, you know, it's too late for me. It's too broken to be used in a good way or to make a difference or to walk in purpose. Like people, I felt stuck. So I understand that feeling very much. And I don't know, I get to tell them the truth that God is going to meet you right in the middle of your mess, just like the woman at the well, and he doesn't shame you and he offers you living water. He offers you hope. And for me, he just completely rewrote my story in a way that I never could have done myself. There was no way that we were going to end up here with our family intact without him.
Okay, you've told your story to the listeners and they've heard it,
Yeah.
and now they're intrigued, maybe. Or maybe they're going through the same thing that you went through and their marriage is on the rocks and they're not sure what to do. What final word could you give to them to encourage them and bring hope before we sign off and say goodbye today?
I would say that if you're listening today and you are in that place, I just want to say don't give up. Don't believe the lie that it's too late. Surrender it to God. God sees you and He loves you and He is not done with your story. And I promise you, He brings beauty from ashes and He still heals and He makes a way. And if He could do that with me and my life and my marriage, I know He can do it for you. And I would just encourage you to hold on and to surrender it and give it to Him.
That's a good word. So, Mandy, I just want to thank you for taking the time today and sharing your heart with the listeners and with our viewers. And I just know it's going to make a change in some people's lives. I mean, and I pray that it saves marriages because
Thank
that's
you, Patricia.
always wonderful. So, just know that we we just are supporting you, and if there's anything that we can do, we are here for you. Thank you for joining us today with Ministry with Coffee. We are so glad that you are here. We pray that this episode brought you hope and encouragement. And we ask that you like this page, and we also ask that you share it with your friends and your family. Thank you so much again for joining us and for being a part of Ministry with Coffee. Have a great day.